All right, beautiful. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to take this opportunity to thank each one of you for finding time to be with us. Today's conversation is supposed to take about an hour, and it's just abstractly on the new thinking. It's not really new. Basically, we have had a lot of these conversations, but we are trying to put it into the context of today's business world. So we are calling it data-driven decision making. And then at the end of the day, we hope as leaders where you are, you'll be able to carry or take home one or two things that can help you or help you at a professional level or help you at a personal level. So I would request that if you have any questions or comments, please drop them in on the inbox because of time. But we have a dedicated team behind the scene who will be able to respond to each one of them. I'll begin by just basically introducing myself. This is me. My name is Omngala Kolo. I work for IMS Africa Limited as a partner. I'm part of the managing team, but we also have a team. Some of you have met the team, but in the course of the year, as we continue sharing, engaging, you'll be able to meet the rest of the team. I've worked also in a number of organizations, as you can see. That is my background in terms of education, with a major in food safety at Egerton University and a postgraduate program in occupational health and safety. I'm a Kenyan who's married to one wife, two children officially, and the men who are on the call, I'm sure you understand what that means. That is my telephone number and my email address. So please feel free to continue engaging beyond this webinar in terms of reaching out and so on and so forth. So today's webinar, I want us to look at one module. Basically, it's a big module, but we decided probably we roll it out from module 3, which is the using data to make decisions. So there are a number of there are other 3 modules which, for those of you who want to engage more, we have a master class on the same, which we shall be communicating, and we'll be able to advise how and when you can join for full modules so that you see how then this interacts with one another. So the focus area will be using data to make decisions, and decisions are everyday things that we do in our businesses, in our personal life. But at the end of the day, as new leaders into the market, you find yourself struggling a lot with making decisions, or rather having challenges with the decisions you've made or your team have made based on the context of the information you have. But we are saying data today plays a big role in making decisions. Data plays a big role in making decisions. So the focus then will be the assumption is that a number of us we understand data analytics, or you have been in a scenario where you have been taken through how to analyze data and the data and its framework, because there's data presentation, analysis. This is not going to be part and parcel of this module. So, and then of course, once you make decisions, sometimes they don't work the way you expected. So then the issue of problem solving also comes in, and it becomes a systematic way of handling decisions within the organization. So without further ado, then for me, I think it's important to mention that decisions are made because we have problems in the organizations. Uh, Without problems, we will not be having these conversations. So what happens is that most of us we operate at the lower base of that particular paragraph, where 40% Um, uh, we are handling daily tasks. 50% of our times we are firefighting, especially those of us who are in organizations. And then you are leaving less than 10% for your continuous improvement, or what you call the strategy. So what we are saying is that because of problems, you find yourself in a mix where you need to make some certain data, some certain decisions. So the need to do daily problem solving, the need to ensure that you achieve the functional results or functional objectives or business objectives. It makes us as leaders in those organizations to be able to find ourselves in scenarios where we have to make decisions. And of course, at the end of the day, what we are saying that if you are a leader, you need to find a way of making sure that your time is actually reserved for value add activities rather than running in firefighting mode throughout the session. So yeah, so basically what we are saying that the difference between where we are and where we need to go is right decisions. And those decisions must be made. And one of the reasons we are saying that for you to make a right decision, then you must be in a position to make use of data so that you are not a gut feeling person, or you make decisions on emotions. So this is ultimately why we are here. This is the reason why we are saying data has become the center of decisions in most of the organization. Now, solving problems is a value proposition. Solving problems is a value proposition. So when you look at most organizations, whether it's small SME or those of us who are working in corporates, you realize that at every stage we have to solve problems. But what we're saying that when you're solving problems or making those right decisions, you are likely attending to a need or a pain, a need or a pain. Now, what happens is that if you are in that position, what you see is the pain, or what you see is the need. So most of us we tend to leave it at superficially at that particular point in terms of addressing that particular pain. But in a nutshell, what we're saying is that whenever you are solving problems, you are actually providing relevance to the needs. You need to provide relevance to the need or specific benefits you think they will come as a result of that solution or making decisions. So this is now when you start getting to the hierarchy of what we don't see. Now, basically, the other aspect of it is that right decisions, or when you're solving a problem, you highlight what makes that particular decision unique or better than the alternative. So when there's for example, probably you're working in a factory setup and you find yourself in a scenario where maybe there's a defect in the process, and you're saying that you have to make a decision that will make that defect to be less. So when you say what you see is the pain, the defects, or the need that we need to reduce these defects. But at the end of the day, the value proposition are things that we don't usually speak about it, and sometimes those decisions are not accepted at a higher level because no one has seen that unique proposition that you are offering. Ultimately, all solutions must focus on the outcome ultimately, and this is what the higher side of it, which we don't see, because when we say we see a problem as a defect, then that translates into, if we have a solution, it translates into increased efficiency or cost saving rather than problem itself. So now that is now where most of us then we start failing to articulate some certain proposals we have, because we have failed to see the higher aspect of all problem solving beyond just the need or that particular pain. And this conversation, therefore, is just going to help us to understand how do you then present a solution rather than just putting it that there's a defect, or there's a leaking tap somewhere, you need a tap, or the transport, we need to get some money to buy transport, because you will have to approach someone and you'll have to be very clear in your mind that there's a problem or a pain. But at the end of the day, let us also show them the outcome of that decision, because that is where now we put a value proposition as far as making decisions in organizations is concerned. So basically, when we say a data-driven decision making, what we are saying is that we actions we take that must be systematic in terms of collecting data, analyzing, examining, and being in a position to interpret that data so that you are in a position to inform a practice or a policy in an organization. And that informing a practice or a policy is what we're saying, that you are able to make the right decision. You're able to make the right decision. Now, so as I mentioned today, this particular webinar is not going to focus on collection analysis and examination. It's basically assuming that you have already collected data or you have access to data where you are, which I'm sure we do. You are familiar with the analysis process. You can present data in some certain formats, whatever it is, tables, whatever it is. But once you have data, how do you then rely on that particular data to be able to make the right decisions? So that's what I want us to focus on, because the issue of collection, analysis, and examination is part of the other modules that we are not going to look at it today. So why are we insisting on data? Why is it important that decisions we make are data driven? One is basically that data gives you qualifiable proof so that we stay away from taking decisions that are emotional or are malicious, because most of the time we have seen in most organizations across the region. For some of us who are supported beyond within the region, is that most decisions are emotional. Sometimes these two things happen, and within that particular time when issues are happening, people are making decisions, and those decisions sometimes they backfire because they were not data driven, and therefore you find yourself in bigger problems. So data gives you a qualifiable proof. So you are able to justify. You can actually justify the decision, and I'll be coming back to you in the next slide just to show you how that can be done. So when you make use of data, you build more complete and accurate reflection accurate reflection on the issue and the solution. Because at the end of the day, from a business point of view, business is seen from a cost point of view and a time point of view. Usually, all the problems we see in organization at one particular point they'll be limited to costs and time. And therefore, we are saying when you have data and you can be able to articulate it to that point of seeing it from a time point of view or from a cost point of view, then you are in a position to build a complete, accurate reflection on the cost of the problem and the cost of the decision you want to take. Because the reason we say that you have to reduce it to that level is because our leaders or the supervisors who supervise us, most of the time they are wired from a business point of view in terms of money, in terms of looking at making decisions from a cost point of view. Now, if what we need to do is to be in a position to make sure that we articulate the decision from their thought process. You are the technical person, but you are articulating decision from their thought process. And therefore, it becomes critical that as we enhance the prowess around using data to make decisions, it becomes a powerful tool that can help us in three things. One, whenever we want to make changes. So you'll find in our organization, we have changes to be made, and sometimes those changes will be made for someone wants to bring in a new let's say a new pasteurizer, if you are in, let's say, in a milk industry. But that decision, you'll find it will be a bottleneck because maybe there are other vats or the storage capacities or the electricity that someone did not consider. So you get that the new decisions are actually bottling at one particular point because no one thought through the data across the value chain before we made those particular decisions. So number two is then the question of long-held assumptions. We work in organizations where we have certain assumptions. Most of you, those of you who are employed the same time like some of us, you walk into a facility and someone will tell you, no, you are young. We have been doing this thing for the last 17 years. I don't know if some of you are familiar with that type of talk. I'm sure, Lorena, good you do understand where I'm coming from. So sometimes we arguing out some of those long-held assumptions becomes a challenge, a big challenge when you don't have data. And that's why we're saying that some of you may have experienced this and you're still experiencing this because the industry is evolving. The business world is evolving. The organizations are evolving. They're coming from generations which were hired and they will do things because they've been done like this to a generation that is now asking questions why we need to do things the way we need to do. And that's why I'm saying that if you understand articulation of data and making decisions, it becomes a tool for you to question some of those long-held assumptions because you can prove them from a data point of view why you need to change them or why you want them to be handled in a different specific way. Number three, a mindset or a practice around making decisions with data, it helps us a lot in facilitating communication. When I say communication is basically we sit in meeting rooms, we sit at decisions where, at boardrooms where decisions are being made. And sometimes you find yourself, you have nothing much you can put on the table. But if you have data and you have consumed that data to the extent necessary, it helps you a lot to be able to make those particular decisions. Now, this conversation, just as I continue putting it into the context, if those of us who have implemented international standards, you realize that it has actually been anchored in international standards, what you call the high-level structure, HLS, high-level structures. ISO 9000 has embodied this as one of their principles as a leader, because there are 7 principles of leadership and management. And principle number 6 is actually speaking about the conversation we're having today, that every decision in any organization ought to have evidence based on data to make such decisions. So you can see even the international community, how is elevating this issue to a level where they're saying that any leader must be principled enough to make decisions based on data. So we are leaders out here, and we just need to remind ourselves that we make a lot of decisions, or we are likely to go seek for decisions to be made. But if you walk there without data, then it becomes a little bit critical. So this is what if you read ISO 9000, you see this is what they're saying here, that you cannot manage what you can't measure. I mean, and I keep asking, I know Aweru is on this line, I keep asking him, how many children do you have? Because you cannot pay school fees for children you don't have. You have to first of all understand. So that's the basic level from a family point of view, basic level of understanding how that and then helps us. Now, what happens is that when we are out here in our business environment, that thinking sometimes it eludes us. But when you are at a family personal level, we seem to articulate some of these things in a very interesting way unconsciously, but we fail to replicate the same when we come to the business environment. You can only manage what you can measure. You can only pay school fees for children, you know how many you are. It's the same thing that if you are in an organization, you are able to actually make some decisions based on the information that you have. Now, so search then supports improvement. Search supports better decisions and results, and verify what you call verifiable gains, or means to hold those particular gains. So again, you can see how ISO has embodied this as an international standard as a principle number 6, which all leaders out here, not just me and you, even the leaders who report to or those who report to us, need to articulate that decision ought to be made from a data point of view. So in a nutshell, what all this is all about is basically saying it begins by data, and we collect a lot of data. We collect a lot of data from our organization, beginning from the gates. When someone walks into the gates, we either through a thumbs up or someone writing in a book, that's already data being collected. By the time you're coming to your desk, or by the time you're filling up a form, by the time you are going to a panel of a machine and you're inputting some information, this is data being collected. But collection of data, I think as the industry, we have really, really made big strides in terms of collecting data. But where we are failing is where we are failing the analysis and the interpretation or presentation of that particular information. Now, the presentation must be in line with, you need that data to be able to make some certain decisions. So facts concerning, they will be concerning people, facts will be concerning objects. So what I'm saying, data in our organization has a broad base from basically people, objects, or events, or even other entities that are happening there. And events, for example, in operations, if you collect data on defects, you collect data on output, you're collecting data on production, you're collecting data on how motions or things are moving, you're collecting data on what tasks have been done. So we collect data. Data is collected. So when you're saying data is facts concerning that, because every time you write, like for example, people walking into the gate, you're collecting information on how people are walking to the facility. Or if there are defects every time, or if there are breakdowns, every time a machine breaks, we are writing down. That's collecting data. So that we do a lot. Where we fail is now to present that in a suitable, interpreted, what you call information. So how do you translate those data into that? And as I mentioned, this is not part of today's webinar. Today's webinar is basically to be able to challenge each one of us in terms of how do you then use data to make decisions. Now, a combination of data and that information is what we are now calling knowledge. Knowledge. So the insights into appropriate actions based on the interpreted data. Basically, moving data into information and making decisions. Moving data into information and making decisions. Now, having said that, it's important that then at this particular point, we interpret what it's here, because leaders are interesting people, all of us included. Sometimes it's easy to complain how your leader is not responding to what you want, or a decision you want to be made in such a way. But you must recognize how are they wired. So basically, the graph I'm showing here, you would realize that whenever there's a problem, because we are saying we must make decisions to correct problems. Whenever there's a problem, every problem has a cost to the business. So that's what we call here failure cost. Failure cost. Every problem in an organization has a cost. So for example, if you have a leaking tap in a facility, the more it keeps leaking, it's a problem. But that leaking has a cost. Or when we talk about, let's say, lateness, someone is not coming to work late, it's a cost to the business. That's what we say failure cost. Or when you are saying, let's say there's a defect, so you're producing a number of, let's say out of every 100 cars, there are 4 cars which are defective. That failure is a cost, to the business. But you as a leader, you can actually make a decision But for every decision we make, it's also a cost. That's what you're calling the prevention cost. The prevention cost. So the decision you make is also a cost, or the decision you want to be made is also a cost. Now, this is what draws the line between the people who make right decisions and those who make wrong decisions. So if you look at that graph, what you call optimal quality level, all decisions that are made where the cost of failure is higher than the cost of prevention, those are correct decisions. Because if a leaking tap, if it's losing a liter of water or 1 liter, 1.5 liters of water, let's say in 1 minute, if you were to calculate how many cubic liters of water you lose in a year, if you don't act on that particular leaking tap, then realize that you're going to lose almost 238,000 Kenya shillings. But a decision to prevent it means you walk to your leader and you are asking for 3,000. Hello? Okay, Esther, I would be muting you. Let me know when you want to speak. So what we are trying to say here is that decisions that are made when the cost of the decision you have taken is lower than the cost of the failure, that's a right decision. Most of us, we tend not to, we don't look at it from that logic. And that's why sometimes we struggle. And not even struggle, sometimes you take a file to your manager to make a decision, but it's not very clear to him why you need a tap or you need taps to go and replace leaking taps. And that's why now we are saying if we are in the space of leadership, then it's important that you look at data. And data means that you know how much that water it is in a minute, in a day, and in a year. And you are saying, I can convert this defect from just liters of water we are leaking into money discussion. So you are telling your manager, if we don't fix this particular leaking tap of water, we are going to lose 238,000 Kenya shillings in a year. All I'm asking for is 3,000 to get the best tap out there so that we can prevent that. That way, you actually endear on the person who needs to append that decision faster than just dropping a file to their office where I say we have a defect and I need it to be replaced. Because our leaders, most of them, they also may not be articulating decision making from this type of thinking. So this particular graph is something that we must reflect on it a little bit because it gives us an opportunity to be able to look at the data we have vis-a-vis the cost of the problem versus the decision we want to make. And that's what I'm now saying here is that you can't go wrong in making decision aligned to this type of mindset. You cannot go wrong. Number two, all data in an organization can be reduced to money conversation. All data, including when people are signing in to come in at the gate, it can always be analyzed and articulated from a money point of view. And as a leader, that type of understanding starts pushing you closer to have the right conversation. And that was what we are saying here. When we understand that type of thinking, the conversation is won because you will be moving into offices or onto your leaders or making decisions knowing very well that from a balanced point of view, I have made a decision that whose cost is cheaper than the problem that we are seeing. And this is basically one area that we want to articulate and we want to make sure that our leaders articulate, and we must also make sure that the teams that are leading, that we are leading, are within that frame of thinking, so that we are all moving the organization into a position where we are making right decisions, but those decisions are actually driven from a data point of view. So the point I want to make here is basically is that all information or data into information in the organization can be reduced into a money conversation. And if you are in the position to do that, then you place yourself in a better position to actually win the conversation around the decisions you want to make for that organization. Now, so as I just quickly wrap into this, what we are saying is that it begins. So it begins by you establishing the problem and, of course, the desired outcome. That's where it starts from. What is the problem? A leaking tap. What is the problem? People not coming to work late. What is the problem? We have several defects that are coming from the line. Or we have, people utilization of material, maybe equipment not there. That is the problem. Then the desired outcome, I want to increase the efficiency, or I want to do the defect, or I need to have people to come. That's where we begin the conversation. But it becomes then important that you define a question, remembering the cost of quality. So if this is the problem, what is the solution from the cost gap? Where is the problem cheaper than the solution? Because if you're thinking through a solution that is going to be expensive than the problem, then we would rather deal with the problem. So you define a question around that. Now, once you have defined a question around that, it goes to step number 3, where now you say, do I have any data that can help me to prove the hypothesis, to prove what I'm thinking through? And if you are in an organization, we collect a lot of data. So probably you just need to review the existing data and organize it to a level. So when I say organizing it, what I mean that the data you get will not have a cost element, but it's your duty then to start seeing it from a cost point of view, so that you also review it against the problem. Because remember, our leaders understand money and time. They understand money and time. And therefore, if you leave that data in the form it is, in the form of defects, in the form of accidents, in the form of efficiency, most of our leaders, sometimes it takes them quite a while to be able to figure out what is it that you want to achieve with the conversation. But if you can now review that data and put it in a way that they can see the money conversation, then you're already winning the loan. This is where we say collect that data if it's not there. And if it is there, review it to the extent necessary so that you start putting the question into something visible. Then make the data make sense for you. So making sense for you, it just means that you're very clear the problem and the cost of the problem, and you're very clear now on the solution and the cost of the solution. And if where you're sitting, the cost of solution is higher than the cost of the problem, don't even just stop there and formulate a new question or formulate a new solution you think it can work. And that's why you realize some of us in some of these organizations, we struggle a lot, because you find yourself moving with a decision to your boss's desk, and it remains there. Sometimes not because they don't understand. It's just because they're trying to struggle. How are they also going to articulate the same to the maybe directors in terms of business, from a business mindset? And then, of course, take action. But it's always good that once you have taken that action, always assess and evaluate the action, whether it's giving you the results you're looking for. Now, evaluating and assessing helps you as an individual to cement the decision within the organization. And what normally happens is you do one decision, it gives the results, you do another one, and by the time you're doing 2 or 3 decisions, you position yourself to a place where people trust you enough whenever you say, can we do ABCD? Because they know that decisions you make are actually adding value to the business. So the issue of evaluating, assessing becomes critical for you and for the organization. Remember, we say it's data provides proof for you when you're making some of these decisions. So basically in organizations, we have abundance of data, a lot of it. Some of it we collect, we do it with it nothing. And I don't blame the organizations, or neither do I blame us. But it's a question of now leaders in different specific departments or sections. And if you lead a section, a department, or the organization, then it becomes critical for you now to start asking yourself a lot of questions. What I'm putting here is basically for what you call downtime. It helps you to look at some of the areas because all problems will will manifest themselves in what you call downtime. All problems will manifest themselves in what you call downtime. So basically, defects is a problem. Either the service you're providing is a problem or the product you're providing has a defect. That is a problem. And a defect is a cost to the business. When we are overproducing, so you find yourself in a scenario where you're doing overproduction, and overproduction then means that you're actually producing more than what you need, and it starts hitting on other aspects, storage facilities, and so on and so forth. Then there's what we call waiting. You find yourself in a scenario where people are waiting, or you have a machine that depends on another machine, and that machine has a problem there, which causes a problem in where you are, and then you are waiting. When you are waiting, there are people there who are paying, they're not working. There are other things that you're using, electricity, light, or I mean, a lot of things that are happening that are waiting for that particular problem. So whenever you see a scenario where people are waiting, it should trigger your mind that we have a problem, and probably we may need to access some data and put that problem into the perspective so that we can make some certain right decisions as far as that is concerned. Of course, non-utilized labor, transport. I walk into some facilities and you see very interesting things around transport. Some of you using, some of us using, what is it called? Let's say a 12-ton lorries to go and bring 1 ton of products. That is data that we can start evaluating a little bit, and we start asking ourselves, is it worth it? Is it worth it what we are doing? Is it making sense? Can we make different decisions? Of course, inventory. So question of looking at how much you have. Some of us, we have a lot, we don't even know what we have. So it begins by, first of all, collecting that information and so on and so forth. Then motion and what we call extra processing. So these are just a few examples of areas that you have the information, and it may be recorded or not. But at the end of the day, it's just reflecting a little bit, and then you see if these are some of the areas you're struggling with, and the areas what therefore are hypothesizing. So we collect data or review existing data and be able to put that data from a cost of problem versus the cost of the decisions you want to make. And from that type of thinking, we make some certain decisions. So this, in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, was just basically to highlight in a brief what then data means to us as leaders, and especially those leaders who have access to data, who can analyze data, but we probably lack in moving one step into using that information to make decisions. And this is what Demin said many years ago, that without data, you are just another person who's making an opinion. And you reflect it a little bit. Most of us in our organization, we are heavily opinionated in the decisions we make. And I think it's important that we start looking at it differently going forward, so that we can actually make data from a very informed position. Now, from a culture point of view, this war of making bad decisions or making decisions on emotions or making decisions with malice cannot be won by one individual. That's why we are here. It cannot be won by you alone in an organization. It will have to incorporate a number of us, beginning by you and the rest, in dedicating some time and collaboration like this one. So where we are saying all of you have chosen to put 1 hour aside just to have this conversation, and hopefully that it's going to add 1 or 2 things in our thought process, so that whenever we are at workplaces or wherever we are out there, we can be able to start looking at things in a little bit different. Of course, assisting teams to build understanding and knowledge, that will be a very important aspect, because if you look at it critically, you need to make sure the teams that are reporting to us, they also have that thinking, so that you gel, you move. Otherwise, you don't want to find yourself as an island. It will overwhelm you in one way or another. Then work closely with those teams. Now, the reason why I say work closely with teams is because a lot of data is not documented. A lot of that is not just when I was heavily involved in a factory setup. One of the things that I really used to rely a lot on was working to teams, and sometimes they tell you information that is not documented anywhere. Someone will just tell you, today have you walked through the factory? Or they will ask, you'll be hearing people say, and where do they buy this material? And no, that is information is being passed to you, because that person, without recording, he can even touch materials and know a good and a bad one. So over time, the whole thing is being synthesized in their hands. And as a leader, if you don't learn the art of working with them, some of these the decisions then become very difficult to articulate. So basically, as I come to a conclusion that we can have some 10 minutes for Q&A, I just want to pose a question to all of us. Are we facts and figures sort of persons, or do we rely a lot on our gut feelings as we make decisions? And you don't have to answer that. Just think through, reflect a little bit about that. And once you've done that, and reflect also a little bit, you report to someone, or you have people reporting to you where you are, or how do you think about them as far as this conversation is concerned? Are they facts and figures people, or also they make decisions from gut feelings? And this question here is not to make us look small, but it's a question of just to help us to articulate our thought processes to the level where, and then we start looking at some of these things in piecemeals. They don't have to be very big, but we start making some strides. So as I conclude, this was just an overview of the articulation around why we need to make decisions that are data-based from a cost point of view. We have a full module for the same on our master classes. So if you were to just check our website, you'll be able to see that, where we'll be able to break all these modules into small pieces from collection of data all the way to what we are talking about, so that some of us who may want to understand how to frame, how to collect data, and then once you have data, how do you then analyze it, and then how do you present it, and then how do you make sure that it can be incorporated into your decision making. So this webinar was just basically an eye opener, so that we become a people that are solution oriented from a data point of view. Now, attitude is very critical, and honestly speaking, looking at how many of us are here, I'm happy. The first thing that you make a decision to sit on this webinar by MS Africa, it's telling a lot as far as attitude is concerned, because we always say knowledge, attitude, and practices. So some of us, we could be heavily knowledgeable, but without the right attitude, then even the practices or the behaviors we are looking for becomes a challenge to articulate. So at this particular point, then I want to have some 10 minutes where we can have some open questions, and then we let it go at exactly 8. The microphone, where you are, you can just raise your hand. I'll be able to see you and you ask your question. Was it helpful? Was this 1 hour helpful, Susan? Elizabeth?
Yes, it was very helpful.
Yeah. Do you have any questions, Susan?
No, I do have a question.
All right. Veronica, pleasure to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for the session. It's very enlightening.
Asante sana. Bwana Kute, you're also an expert on some of these things. You have one or two things to add?
Hi, Apollo. Not really. I just wanted to get your own idea of what you mean by data driven. So I guess we're on the same page. So when it comes to the actual doing, maybe we can have a different conversation elsewhere.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you so much. Lorraine?
This was a really informative session. Appreciate it, and very relevant to my line of work as well.
I'm happy to hear that. Yeah. All right. So, okay, good. Very helpful from Redmi. There's someone on Redmi. I don't know who it is. There's Lydia Mudoni. Quite insightful. Thank you for that, as well as a user and someone in the session was really informative. Thank you so much for that. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think for because of time, I know some of you are still on the road, some of you're still at work like me. I would want to, if you don't have any further question, I want to close this session now. And I look forward to meeting you in further conversations as we continue developing our leadership skills and our process. Asanteni sana. Thank you so much.